There comes a moment in everyone's life, a spiritual awakening, when you look around and something just feels off. The people you used to vibe with, they seem like they're on a different planet. Conversations that once felt normal now sound empty. Social get-togethers that should energize you. Instead, they leave you completely drained. And then, a quiet question starts to bubble up, one that few dare to ask. Why does being alone bring me more peace than being around most people? This question isn't about being antisocial. It's not about some kind of spiritual pride. It's about something much deeper, something that Eckhart Tolle has spent decades studying, and that modern neuroscience is only just beginning to understand. If you've ever felt this way, if you've ever preferred the quiet of an empty room to the noise of a crowded party, then this video is going to reveal why that's not a problem. It's a sign that something inside of you has shifted irreversibly. But here's what no one tells you. This preference for solitude, it's not what you think. And what I'm about to reveal in the next few minutes could completely change how you see yourself. First, we need to understand a crucial distinction that Eckhart Tolle makes in his teachings. There's a fundamental difference between being alone and being in solitude. They might sound the same, but they're completely different states of consciousness. When a person is just alone, they're not at peace with themselves. There's an inner restlessness, a sense that something is missing. They seek company, not because they genuinely crave connection, but because they can't stand their own presence. The silence terrifies them, because in that silence, they're forced to confront what they're avoiding, themselves. But when a person is in solitude, the opposite happens. There's peace. There's completeness. There isn't that nagging feeling that something is missing, because in this state, the person has understood something essential. They are already whole. They don't need anything external to validate their existence. And here's the first revelation that changes everything. Awakened individuals don't prefer being alone because they reject others. They prefer solitude because they've discovered something extraordinary within themselves. A recent article discussing Tolle's teachings puts it perfectly. You're not rejecting others. You're protecting the sanctuary where the awakening happens. The place where you find yourself, where you remember what you truly are. Stop and reflect on that for a moment. Sanctuary, that's the word. Solitude for the awakened isn't a prison. It's a sanctuary, a sacred space of consciousness that can only exist when you honor the silence. That keeps it alive. And neuroscience is confirming this in surprising ways. Researchers have discovered that when we're in moments of quiet, in periods of intentional solitude, something specific happens in the brain. A neural network called the default mode network activates. This network is responsible for crucial internal mental processes: memory consolidation, self-reflection, planning for the future, and most importantly, the ability to make connections between seemingly disconnected ideas. Studies published in 2024 show that just 10 to 20 minutes a day of solitude, without distractions, can significantly improve focus and reduce stress. But for spiritually awakened individuals, this time in solitude isn't just beneficial, it's necessary. It's the space where consciousness expands. But why then? Does being with certain people drain the energy of those who have awakened? That question led me to discover something that completely shifts the perspective. Eckhart Tolle talks about a concept he calls the pain body. It's the accumulation of all the emotional pain, hurt and trauma from life experiences. We all carry this pain body, but what happens in relationships, especially close relationships, is that pain bodies feed off each other. When you're around a person whose pain body is active, something happens. If you're not present, if you're not conscious, your own pain body awakens. Tolle describes it vividly. The pain body wakes up, and it starts screaming, and then you react. The other person reacts to your reaction, and a spiral of unconsciousness begins. For an awakened person, this dynamic becomes unbearable not because they're superior, not because they're more evolved, but because they can see what's happening. They can feel the toxic energy before the words are even spoken. And every interaction like that takes a huge energetic toll. This explains why social gatherings that should be enjoyable become exhausting. It's not the quantity of people, it's the quality of the energy. It's being surrounded by active pain bodies, by egos fighting for attention, by dramas that feed off unconsciousness. And there's something even deeper happening that most don't realize. When you awaken, your energetic sensitivity increases dramatically. You start to feel things that previously went unnoticed. The unspoken tension between two people, the anxiety disguised as lively conversation, the sadness hidden behind forced smiles, and constantly absorbing all of that is exhausting. It's like having an internal radio that used to pick up just a few stations, and suddenly it can pick up all of them. The volume of energetic information you process on a simple trip to the grocery store can be overwhelming. Now imagine a party, a family get-together, a work meeting full of competing egos. And here's something I need you to understand deeply, because it changes everything about how you see your relationships. Eckhart Tolle says something that initially seems disturbing. Relationships don't exist to make you happy. Relationships exist to make you conscious. He states that if you keep seeking salvation through a relationship, you will be disillusioned repeatedly. But if you accept that the relationship is here to make you conscious instead of happy, then the relationship will offer true transformation. That's a complete paradigm shift. Most people enter relationships seeking completeness, seeking someone who will fill a void. But that void is internal. No external person can fill it. And when two empty people try to fill each other, the result is always the same: disappointment, resentment, conflict. That's why awakened individuals are selective, not out of arrogance, out of awareness. They understand that being with the wrong person isn't just uncomfortable, it's a setback on the spiritual path. Every unconscious interaction pulls you back into old patterns. Every drama you get involved in strengthens the ego you're trying to transcend. And here's the paradox that few understand. It's not that awakened individuals don't want connection. They crave genuine connection more than anything else. But true connection is only possible between two present people. Two people who aren't trying to use each other to fill empty spaces. Two people who are complete in themselves. Eckhart Tolle explains that unless you access the frequency of presence and awareness, all relationships, especially intimate ones, are deeply flawed and dysfunctional. They might seem perfect for a while, especially when you're head over heels in love. But inevitably, that apparent perfection is shattered by arguments, conflicts, dissatisfaction. The solution isn't to avoid relationships altogether. The solution is to cultivate presence. The only way to not be controlled by the pain body is by cultivating presence, Tolle teaches. Presence is the key. The only place where you can experience what's real is right here and right now. And it's exactly here that preferring being in solitude becomes an act of wisdom, not isolation. When you choose to be alone, you're choosing to protect your presence. You're choosing not to expose your consciousness to energies that pull you back into unconsciousness. You're honoring the sacred space inside of you. Which brings me to a discovery from scientific research that connects everything we're discussing. A study published in the journal Religions in 2024 investigated the relationship between spirituality, religiosity, and loneliness. The results revealed something fascinating. The relationship is complex. Spirituality alone doesn't eliminate loneliness, in the sense of being alone. But people with consistent spiritual practices reported higher life satisfaction, even when technically alone. Another study, conducted by researchers at the University of North Carolina in collaboration with Harvard's Human Flourishing Program, found something even more interesting. People who had transformative spiritual experiences in adolescence showed greater civic engagement and volunteerism in adulthood, but also elevated levels of loneliness. The researchers described this as a double-edged phenomenon. Spiritual transformation connects you to something larger, a purpose, a sense of mission. But it can also disconnect you from the majority of people who don't share that experience. You see the world differently. You feel things differently. And that naturally creates a distance. But remember when I talked about the distinction between being alone and being in solitude? This research confirms exactly that. It's not that awakened individuals are lonelier in the negative sense. It's that they need more time in solitude to process, to integrate, and to maintain their elevated consciousness. It's a need, not a deficiency. And here, I need to pause and ask you something directly. How many times have you forced yourself to attend social gatherings that drained your energy? How many times have you feigned interest in conversations that meant nothing to you? How many times have you felt guilty for preferring to stay home instead of going out with people you know will leave you exhausted? If you've identified with any of that, I need you to understand something crucial. That guilt you feel, it's not yours. It was implanted by society. We live in a culture that values extroversion, constant socializing, popularity measured by the number of people around you. But that culture wasn't created by awakened individuals. It was created by egos seeking external validation. The truth is, there's nothing wrong with you. Your preference for being in solitude is a sign of spiritual health, not of illness. It's an indicator that your deepest self is craving space to breathe, to exist, to simply be. Tolle speaks about three aspects of true freedom and the enlightened life: non-resistance, non-judgment, and non-attachment. Notice how all three of these aspects relate directly to conscious solitude. Non-resistance means accepting the present moment exactly as it is. When you are in solitude, it's easier to practice this because there are no external egos creating dramas that demand your reaction. Non-judgment means observing without labeling. In solitude, you can observe your own thoughts without the noise of other people's opinions influencing your perception. Non-attachment means not clinging to outcomes. In solitude, you learn to be complete without depending on external approval, on forced connections, on validation from others. But here's the real test of consciousness that Tolle mentions, and that few have the courage to face. He says that it's easy to fool yourself about your state of consciousness if you avoid other people. For presence to take deep root, it needs to be tested in the fire of relationships. That seems to contradict everything I've said so far, doesn't it? But it actually complements it. Solitude is the space where you cultivate presence, but relationships are where you test that presence. They're where you discover if what you've built in silence can survive the chaos of the external world. Awakened individuals don't avoid all relationships. They're selective. They choose who to share their time and energy with, and when they are in relationships, they use each challenge as an opportunity to deepen their consciousness. That's why the correct phrase isn't that awakened individuals prefer to be alone. The more accurate phrase would be awakened individuals prefer to be alone than to be in bad company. The difference is subtle, but fundamental. They don't reject companionship. They reject unconscious companionship. They don't run from relationships. They run from relationships that pull them back into unconsciousness. They're not antisocial. They're deeply selective about where they invest their limited energy. And that brings me to the most important point of this entire video, something you need to take with you when this video ends. Conscious solitude is not a destination. It's a tool. It's not an end in itself. It's a means to a much greater end. Think of it like a retreat. Monks throughout history chose periods of isolation, not because they hated people, but because they understood that certain levels of consciousness can only be accessed in profound silence. Solitude removes the distractions that prevent you from hearing the more subtle voice within you, the voice that's muffled by the constant noise of the outside world. And that voice, when you finally hear it, reveals truths that transform everything. It reveals that you were never truly alone, that the loneliness you experienced before awakening was an illusion created by the ego. The ego needs other egos to validate itself. It needs comparison, competition, drama. Without it, it weakens. And when the ego weakens, something larger emerges. Tolle calls this the space between thoughts. That moment of pure awareness where there is no I or other, where there is only presence, pure existence without labels. And here's what most people don't realize. This space, this feeling of peaceful solitude, is where you find true connection. Not just connection with another person, but connection with everything, with life itself, with the consciousness that flows through all of existence. One of the most profound quotes I ever read about this came from a discussion forum dissecting Tolle's teachings. It quoted the Indian master Ramana Maharshi. He said, "A saint helps all humanity without their knowing it. There are no others to mix with. The self is the only reality." Now, initially, that might sound extreme. There are no others. But when you experimentally understand what Maharshi and Tolle are describing, it clicks at the deepest level of reality. Separation is an illusion. You and I, we're just different expressions of the same consciousness. And when you genuinely grasp that, physical loneliness just becomes irrelevant. You're connected to everything, even when you're physically all alone. This is exactly why so many spiritual traditions throughout history have revered periods of retreat and isolation. The Christian mystics retreating to the desert, the yogis meditating in Himalayan caves, the Zen monks in their silent temples. They weren't running away from life. They were diving deeper into it. Discovering that in the absence of external stimulation, something internal reveals itself, something that was always there, but was constantly overshadowed by the deafening noise of the world. Tolle often speaks about his own 2-year period just sitting on park benches after his awakening to the outside world. He probably looked like a homeless bum, a complete failure, but internally, he was experiencing states of consciousness that most people can't even imagine. Solitude was his classroom. Silence was his teacher. But let's bring it back to the practical world, because I know that's where you live. You've got a job, a family, social obligations. You can't just disappear into a cave. So, how do you apply all this to real life? Here are 5 practices that both Eckhart Tolle and neuroscience researchers recommend to help you cultivate conscious solitude, even in a hectic, overscheduled life. First practice: deliberate moments of presence. It doesn't need to be hours. 10 to 20 minutes a day of undisturbed solitude is enough to activate those neurological benefits I mentioned earlier. Maybe it's first thing in the morning before everyone else wakes up. Maybe it's on a park bench during your lunch break. Maybe it's right before you go to bed. The key is it's a space without your phone, without television, without any conversations. Just you and the present moment. Second practice: solid energetic boundaries. Awakened individuals, those who are highly sensitive, need to learn to say no without feeling guilty. No to events that drain you. No to people who suck your energy dry. No to obligations that only exist because of social expectations. Every no to something that doesn't resonate is a resounding yes to your own consciousness. Third practice: conscious pauses during interactions. Even when you are around people, you can create micro moments of internal solitude. A conscious breath between sentences. A single second of presence before responding. These moments keep you anchored while you navigate the social world. Fourth practice: daily energetic review. At the end of each day, ask yourself, what interactions energized me? What interactions drained me? Over time, patterns will emerge. You'll start to see very clearly which relationships nurture your consciousness and which ones undermine it. And then you can adjust your life accordingly. Fifth practice: radical acceptance of your own nature. If you're someone who needs more solitude, accept it without any guilt. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You don't need to force yourself to be more social just because society tells you that you should. Your need for silence is valid. It's sacred. It's part of who you are. And now I want to share something personal about this channel and why I do what I do. For years now, I've been sharing the teachings of Eckhart Tolle and other spiritual masters, not because it's easy, not because it's particularly profitable, but because I know there are people out there, people just like you, watching this video at 2 in the morning, or during a moment of profound crisis, needing to hear exactly this. When you click that super thanks button, it's not just a donation, it's a declaration. You're saying that this content matters, that these deeper truths deserve to be shared, that you're part of this community of souls who have chosen to awaken. It's not payment, it's a statement. It's you declaring which side you're on, and every contribution helps me continue to bring you these truths, the truths that so few channels dare to explore. Now, let me share some signs that you're actually on the right path, because I know there can be doubt. Am I really awakening? Or am I just being antisocial? Am I evolving, or am I just avoiding? First sign, you don't feel resentment when you're alone. Conscious solitude comes with peace, not bitterness. If you're alone and angry at people, that's not awakening, that's woundedness. But if you're alone and at peace, observing life without judgment, that's consciousness. Second sign, when you interact with people, you observe your own reactions. You see when your ego is triggered. You notice when the pain body tries to take over, and instead of reacting automatically, you breathe, you observe, and you consciously choose how to respond. Third sign, you don't feel superior for preferring solitude. In fact, you feel compassion for people trapped in unconscious dramas. You understand that they're suffering, not being malicious, and that compassion prevents you from falling into the trap of spiritual pride. Fourth sign, the quality of your relationships has improved, even if the quantity has decreased. The people who remain in your life are the ones with whom you can have real conversations, genuine connections, moments of shared presence, fewer relationships, but infinitely deeper. Fifth sign, you can be with people without losing yourself. Before awakening, social pressure molded you. You adapted to please. Now, you can be in a group and remain authentic. Your presence doesn't depend on external approval. If you recognize these signs in yourself, celebrate silently, not with ego pride, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the path you've traveled, for the consciousness you've cultivated, for the courage to be different in a world that pressures conformity. And if you don't recognize these signs, don't be discouraged. Awakening isn't a one-time event, it's a process, a gradual unfolding that happens at its own pace. The simple fact that you're watching this video, absorbing these ideas, already indicates that something within you is calling. Remember what I said at the beginning. That preference for solitude isn't what you think it is. Now you understand, and it's not rejection, it's protection. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not isolation, it's sanctuary. You're not alone in feeling different. Millions of people around the world are going through the exact same process. They're also finding that they can no longer engage in empty conversations, the kind where you just talk to be talking. They're also realizing that they need more silence than they used to, a quiet space for reflection, and, inevitably, they're being labeled antisocial by people who just don't get it. But you understand now, and that understanding is power. The power to live authentically, the power to choose consciously with whom and how you invest your precious energy, the power to honor the sanctuary within you without guilt or apologies. Eckhart Tolle has said that the present moment is all that exists. In this present moment, you have a choice. You can continue forcing yourself to participate in a world that no longer resonates with your expanded consciousness. Or you can embrace who you are, becoming. The choice is yours. It always has been. Now, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, do you feel more drained around people? or more energized in solitude? Has your preference changed since you started to awaken? And most importantly, do you still carry guilt for needing more alone time? Share your experience. Team solitude or team crowd? Be honest. And remember, there's no wrong answer. There's only your truth. I read all the comments in the first 2 hours, and I respond personally. If this video touched something inside you, if you felt that moment of recognition, of finally being understood, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. More videos like this are coming. Truths that transform, insights that set you free. Until the next video. And remember, in a world that's constantly screaming, choosing silence is a revolutionary act. Honor your sanctuary, protect your presence, and know that you've never truly been alone.